Welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime, holding court with Engineer Patrick Obath, who is the chair of KEPSA Foundation. Also, we have the chair of Vision 2030 Secretariat, Bunyasi Sakwa. We have Bill Okero, who is an economist and businessman. We also have Ndiritu Muriithi, who is an economist, also an immediate former governor of Laikipia. The question that we are broaching this morning is in regard to the statement that we had from the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, asking or imploring Kenyans to be patient. That also is seeking 2 more years. The government is seeking 2 more years to make sure that the economy has turned around. Is that feasible? That is what we're asking. And we shall be looking at the dollar shortage in the country, where we have the market correcting itself, so to speak, because of pronouncement from all the move by the government to try and salvage the situation. But what is the reality on the ground? Wealthy Kenyans as well, as we can see in the dailies today, are stashing near $1 trillion shillings in dollar accounts. So we want to see what is the current state of play as well. We shall be broaching the issue of the Eurobonds, where we have also the loaners who are greatly shy to loan to the country because of the default fears and trepidation, and that also will be on the table. Before we just continue with the discussion, I think we had raised the question on, we were done with the party politics, so we are trying to mesh it together with... you have a quick one on that? Yes, okay, yes. Let's sum up.
It's a bit curious that it is as me complaining about Kenya Kwanza not implementing its manifesto. You would have thought the Kenya Kwanza members that are saying you're not implementing what we expected to do. Azimio should be saying, instead of commenting what Kenya Kwanza is not doing, they should be saying, had we been in power, this is what we would be doing. This, to show the difference between them and Kenya Kwanza. So, as they say, the shoe that you don't, only the wearer of the shoe feels the pinch. And Kenya Kwanza should be concerned that if they didn't do well, 2027 they can't come back. So they would be pushing their own administration to say, let us do what we promised to guarantee ourselves back in 2027. I do not think that Azimio should come in and say, you didn't do what you promised to do. They should say, we could have done this better. That's, I think, the issue that Patrick was talking about, of having an opposition that demonstrates the options and the alternatives. I hear Ndiritu, governor, here talk about this frequently. He tries to give the alternative what they would do. But you see out here, he's not rising above the din on the street, which is simply objecting to Kenya Kwanza not doing what it promised to do. And on the issue of 2 years to recover, that's not going to be a long thing. We have been going down for quite a while. 2 years ago...
Is there a long thing?
2 years is not a long thing.
Okay.
No.
Or is there a long thing?
Of hunger, because there are ameliorative ways.
Will you really tell that to a person in Mandera now?
No, but the 2 years that the hunger are not tied. That's the point I'm trying to raise.
They're not tied?
No, they're not really tied, no. There's a firefighting process, as you can see. You say, you're going to subsidize this and bring in that, grant this and so on. Those efforts will continue, but will be on a sustained path. It's going even 2 years, maybe a bit optimistic, but let's say it's going to be 2 years. We have been going down this road for a long time. It's not 6 months. I remember in 2021, I brought up a bill in Parliament on reining in public debt. And at that time, part of the problem was whenever debt payment period was coming, and the SGR principle fell in January, I think, of 2021, or something around there, there was a frantic effort to collect money, to put together money in time for payment of the debt. We had borrowed to a point where we were not able to meet our regular goals and objectives as a state. So each time it came, it was a stress. And if it was something you could measure the blood pressure, and blood pressure is measured through methods of the type that Governor Ndiritu has talked about, confidence in this, confidence in that, and so on, you would see that the pressure had risen, and so on. It's just that now it's come to a head. So I think how you manage the economy has consequences in it. So I think 2 years, we're going to get 2 seasons, if the rains are good and so on. That will help to ease it off. But the state, of course, must do more to bring in food in the short term and deal with the hunger thing that we are talking about.
Right. So, Governor Ndiritu, you're being challenged. Yes.
I like to reply, Patrick. Look, Weshua, first of all, had we been in power, this is what we would have done. You must drop interest rates because you are raising interest rates, borrowing at a higher cost to pay older debt that was cheaper. More folly we have never seen. Had we been in power, Mheshimiwa, and you and your party leader Musalia and the government, you still have an opportunity to do it. We would not be setting an inflation target of 7.5. More folly we've never seen. You should set it at 0. If you set the inflation target at 0, allow me. First of all, you give yourself the opportunity to scale down interest rates so that your debt service is less and you enable the private sector to do their work. Now, what you've done and continue to do is a misguided notion. In fact, misguided, I guess, is the best charitable thing I can find. But to insist that your target for inflation must be 7.5, frankly, is to say you don't care about Kenyans. And there is no reason. It's not misled, is what the price stability target that you've given central bank, that is what it says. You should bring it down to 0. It is not whatever. Central bank has increased interest rates for the fourth successive time. So these things is what the government that you are in is doing. We would do them differently. You can't really say that 2 years is a short period of time. Kenyans need food now. You know very well, a key component of inflation is food.
Sure.
I am glad you agree with us that in the short term, even as you hope for better rain, you must support citizens to access affordable food. That is required now. So had we been the ones, we would not have removed the subsidies. As a matter of fact, we would have increased the subsidies. And now you can say, okay, where would the money be coming from? The money would be coming from lower debt service cost, because there is no reason why we are operating with a treasury bill rate of 10.5% now. Treasury bill rate, we should aim for it to be around 2 to 3%. And that difference in the debt service cost is the amount we should be using to support Kenyans. So
I want to challenge you. Why aren't we hearing this from the rallies that you're having? Since
you hear them.
We don't hear them.
You hear them. Look, on the political podium,
you cannot execute this.
What I have explained now is not really practical to explain in a political rally. But if you look at in the political rally, we will talk broadly about reducing the cost of living. We'll talk broadly about reducing the cost of food.
But Governor Ndiritu, what you've said now, explained in Parliament. You can get a motion, or even more strongly, you can get legislation. In Parliament, you can say all of that. It's not coming out.
Indeed. It can be explained in Parliament, and it is being explained, and we shall continue to do so. The reason, now going back to where we started, as we are doing so, government is busy trying to buy out our parliamentarians. Okay? You understand? And this is it is connected.
Fly in Parliament.
Because they will put the question. so it goes like this. This platform that we are talking about, I mean, these things that we are talking about that ought to be done, they are to be prosecuted how? A member brings a bill, for example, to Parliament, it goes to committee. Okay? Woe unto you if your own members have been induced in one way or another to abandon your platform and go and support the other side. And that's exactly what is going on. So the systematic weakening of Parliament makes it more difficult for what Mheshimiwa is saying.
Thank you. Let's just listen into what Musalia Mudavadi had to say so that we can actually just put the whole discussion into context yesterday as he appeared before plenary in Parliament.
We also have some short-term measures to address the food security situation. The government has taken the long-term, sustainable approach of resolving the cost of living predicament. Key to this, Mr. Speaker, is the fertilizer subsidy program. During the 2022-23 short rain season, the government availed 3.1 million bags of fertilizer worth Kenya shillings 3.5 billion to improve farmers' uptake and agricultural yields.
Well, that is just a bit on the fertilizer as well. But broadly, we can't just put the whole session on air just to pick a snippet of what he discussed here and there. But even the question of fertilizer, people are poking holes on it, on the quality of this fertilizer. Farmers are saying it is not really working for us. And we remember the government had said that they did a top plan, survey. You had specialists and experts really advising the government on what's the profile of the soils that we have in different counties and what soils should be applicable. Now, we too need different ground, as they say, with the fertilizer. We can expect that.
We shouldn't expect it, and we should not accept it.
Okay.
But
No.
I think when you try and use one bullet to solve all these big problems, it won't work. And let's just take that fertilizer case.
Yes.
We are all, even non-agriculturalists like me, although I actually can claim now that I am in the field now. Every crop requires a different kind of fertilizer. And every soil requires a different kind of treatment. You can't buy one large batch of fertilizer and expect that to work the same across the whole country. Even within one area, it won't work. With one farm and the next farm, right? It won't work. So, I mean, with all the best intentions, that quantum looks good and big, that can create a big change in the country. But it won't. It won't, because I think it's solving the problem with the wrong medicine.
It's a one.
I think there needs to be a completely different approach to the way we are going to start solving the food crisis in this country.
Right. Bilo, just let's hear from Bilo. Yeah, Bilo.
Yeah, I agree with him. You see, the issue of fertilizer. You remember when President Kibaki came in, they came up with what they called revitalizing the agricultural sector. They developed actually a very well-researched strategic intervention in that sector. And one of the things, even Uhuru, when they came in, fertilizer has always been the easiest thing that every government will bring cheap fertilizer. But that has not been the antidote to food security in this country. It's not. Never mind the corruption involved in the fertilizer. Even this one, the way they have done the procurement and the corruption involved and the substandard fertilizer that the government now admits they imported and all that, and briefcase guys were being given these things in a lorry and all. Forget about all that. It has not worked. It hasn't worked. You need a lot of other things in terms of policy interventions and in terms of strategies to deal with agriculture to address the issue of food security and bring down the price of food. It is not about fertilizer. Look at countries around us. They are not so advanced that they have got excellent fertilizer. They all import things through here and they're producing cheaply. Poor countries. Ethiopia is a poor country. Uganda, all the way, Rwanda, everybody, Malawi, Zambia. I mean, you cannot tell us we are so dumb. We cannot, it's all about government policies, and we've said about this time and time again here on this table. It's not just in agriculture. In every sector, we are becoming uncompetitive in this region. In everything. Industry, we used to be the most competitive. We have lost that competitive edge. It's all about government and its policy. So I think this fertilizer thing is we'll see. They said, give us a year. It's now 2 years. But the season doesn't need 2 years.
Yeah.
The season
Give
will
us
be ready.
it's now 2 years. The fertilizer are failing.
The season is not going to take 2 years. The maize will be harvested soon. But I think there is need to address the elephant in the room. The elephant in this country is always been that the lack of integrity in this country. Things are not being done the way they ought to be done. That's where the problem is. So everything you see, everything you read, what government does, even this one started on the wrong footing. All these KNTCs come about importing foods and what. This is all business being done. Just find out how the procurement is being done, who is supplying all this. There's no KNTC that's going out to buy fertilizer. There's no KNTC that is going out there to buy things, maize or rice. This is all being done through cartels. The same cartels this government said we are going to shoot down, these fellows, when they were in power. And now you just transfer. It's only the shareholding which...
so there's so much rot actually in this fertilizer saga that we have underpower fertilizer that is being put out. How can it be adversely dangerous, so to speak, for the farmers on the ground, that we have cheap fertilizer? Right now, people have been talking about so many, diseases actually that also they come through this cheap fertilizers.
I think there are a couple of things, but two are important for me. One, intrinsically, there are problems with subsidization, subsidy programs. You remember, and if we believe the data, that they were saying that the subsidy, the food subsidy to millers, about July, August, I think they were supposed to have disbursed 4 billion or what was the figure? But only 1.5 had reached millers. 2.5 was somewhere that they sort of say it disappeared. It's interesting how that disappeared. But that's inherent in subsidies. Corruption in subsidies, whether in this country or any other country, is fairly high. So you want to get out of that. That's one. Two, the bad fertilizer can come in simply because KEBS is not doing their work. This has happened before. We have had a problem in sugar, you remember, with mercury and the rest of it. It didn't make sugar imports a bad thing. It was just that it was badly handled. And indeed, if you have, I do not think you have only one type of fertilizer. In fact, I bought some fertilizer last time, and I needed CAN and DAP, and I got both. But there would be mistakes that are done when you do these things in a hurry and you try to give the impression it's a good thing, and you have Governor Ndiritu's supporters saying, hey, but this fertilizer you brought to me is just chalk that has been crushed and so on. So they inherently doubt it. So there are problems. But then why do you want to wait for 2 years? It's going to take a couple of seasons. We should be generous to ourselves. We went through COVID, and we didn't get much agricultural work going. Then we have a raging drought. So it takes a little while to get all the systems again, back on track. The long season production for maize for Kenya, the long season, is going to come in November, December. It is the highlands that produce most of the maize. The maize that's going to come on stream now is a 90-day variety, 120-day variety, that are areas that are smallholder. They're not going. They alleviate, but they don't bring in the huge amounts. And you require like a season or two of those, and then you will probably be on the way to stabilization. But I believe strongly, personally, that importing is always a good solution for shortfalls internally. You paper off these variations to try and keep the food costs within check. So I do hope that as the cash flow situation improves, that either the threat or actual imports must be kept on the table.
Right. Will you tell me then also of this first batch of Russian fertilizer, which Latvia seized last year, that is being shipped into the country by United Nations World Food Programme? Russia had cited the seizure as a key stumbling block to its continued participation in a Black Sea grain deal that allows Ukraine to export grains. So how then do we differentiate what the government has ordered and this particular batch? Because I know once they dock here, it will be just put as a broad brush stroke that this is part of a fertilizer, 200 tons of fertilizer that is being shipped into the country. Are you privy to this?
No, I wasn't privy to that. But at the end of the day, wherever it comes from, however it comes, the primary goal should first, does it get to the intended recipients?
No, the primary goal will be first to tell us if this is a good fertilizer for our soil compared to what the government is importing. No, the one that is coming from Russia.
Whatever fertilizer we get applies to some soil, okay? We have very many different soil types.
But the farmers are not resonating with what the government is saying.
No, I don't
That's
think
the reality
farmers,
of
the critics. I think you should
farmers,
say the critics. The critics.
No, it's the farmers on the ground who are actually complaining about this.
No, it's the critics, maybe farmers also. But it's the critics that are most concerned. But of course, if in fact you have not done specification, we have a lot of information now on soil types and so on. You don't even have to do new studies. And that was not done, and someone has blundered somewhere seriously. But I remember the days of maize imports when it came in. First, because it was yellow, it was a problem. Oh, when you make ugali out of this maize, it doesn't quite come out. Something's wrong here. You always get these kinds of things. What you have to worry about is safety.
But you know, let me come to, it can't be that we have farmers from different counties, not just from one county, who are complaining about this fertilizer.
I think we should say critics. That's more.
No, I thought the ministry.
Why are you insisting on critics?
There was a problem.
Yeah,
the minister
yes.
The ministry.
Critics don't lie. Critics say what they have seen, but he's saying farmers.
No, from my own research, it's the farmers who are complaining, not the critics.
Farmers went on national TV to say the fertilizer, you have to use 2 of them in place of 1. And this, the ministry admitted, yes, there was a problem in the quality of
So the ministry actually was speaking from both sides of the mouth.
Well, it's not called curry. Calro. And the National Agricultural Research Labs, first of all, admitted to the same. Now, I'll tell you what farmers in Laikipia, in Nyahururu in particular, were telling me last week on Friday and Saturday, that if we leave the issue of how much it is, I mean the volume, how many bags can you get, and when it got there, they are getting NPK, and they are interested in DAP. And they explained exactly what Mheshimiwa said here, that if you have to use NPK, then you need 2 bags, and I think and something else they explained. So even though you are now getting it at 3,500, because you have to use 2 bags instead of 1, you end up, your actual costs per acre is still more than 7,000. And this is what, these are the issues that farmers have raised. Government itself has admitted to it. But I think the cost of living problem, the escalating cost of living issue, to say 2 years, I think it's frankly, it cannot possibly be right or even useful. I mean, it's not, you're not giving Kenyans any hope, which is the issue on the table. And you have the long rain season, which we are already in. You will have the short rains. You will expect another long rain season, another short rain season. Now, to say that you will need those 2 years in order to make whatever, and that people should be okay to be hungry for 2 years, I mean, that cannot possibly.
I think the key thing here is that making promises, when you're operating within a global context, is quite dangerous. Right? We've had promises made, and then all of a sudden COVID hit us, so we can't do whatever that happened. Then COVID finished, promises are made, then Ukraine happens. And you've got this whole series of things that are happening, and we are living in a global village. So if you're going to try and import anything, be it fertilizer, be it grain, be it whatever it is, and so forth, all these geopolitical things that are happening across the world are going to impact Kenya. So you have to respond to what you have in a very short window with measures that may not necessarily be long-term measures that you need to do. And as any credible organization, you always have your firefighting. What do you do now? In the meantime, you're working on your long-term strategy. And the long-term strategy you normally don't announce, you just do it. It's going there, and you announce what you're doing in the short term to do the firefighting as you're going along to correct everything else for your long-term strategy. And getting food now, next month, and the month after is firefighting. And working on that is a different strategy completely from saying we are going to fix agriculture. Yeah? Because fixing agriculture is long term. It's going to be 3, 4, 5 years before agriculture in this country is fixed. Because you've got to understand what you need to do to fix agriculture. And a very small part of it is reorganizing the smallholder. The government, in its wisdom about 5, 6 years ago, brought out a very nice proposal saying that we really need to start doing everything for export. And you get the economies of scale that allows you, for example, when you're importing fertilizer, you're importing for large people, and then the small-scale farmer will benefit from that point of view. And the large producers who are producing for export are the ones who are going to moderate what happens in the country. Countries like Brazil, for example, they send us cheap sugar and cheap chickens. Why? Cheaper than we can produce here. It's because for them sugar is a byproduct.
It's a byproduct, yeah.
Yeah, because they've got huge conglomerates that are doing alcohol. And sugar is just one of those things they can produce. So in Kenya, if we are going to try and be food sufficient, we've really got to go to a stage whereby we are producing for export, not producing to feed the country, using the traditional mechanisms that we have. But in the meantime, we still have to use those mechanisms are not going to be able to feed us. So we need to get grain, whatever it is, from somewhere at a cost that is affordable. Now, do you remove duty or do you subsidize? These are the balances that you have to weigh out as to the economy, what is best for the economy under those circumstances. Right? If you take off duty and stuff like that, is one way or another, somebody, the exchequer is not getting money. How will that impact on the economy? Yeah? You provide subsidy that you're taking it out with the exchequer. So at some point, you actually have to create a very clear balancing act that makes it possible to bring in grain at a cheaper level. Right? And so I think that the 2 years for me is a promise that is
unrealistic?
No, it's not unrealistic, but it has so many potholes that it could get into that at the end of 2 years we could be here saying, listen,
they'll be kicking the can down the road again.
Exactly.
Give us another. This is what they say. They are a bit optimistic with the 2 years. So, so maybe the 2 years is just to give hope to Kenyans, as it is.
I think when you stay with what happened at the point of election last year, a promise was made.
Yeah.
Right? And now it is saying, no, we didn't know what was happening in the government, the coffers were empty, whatever it is. We need now a certain period of time. Yeah? So you kicked it down. Between now and then, I can assure you, things are going to happen differently. We've got something just going on just above us here in Sudan, right? That's another proxy war.
Yes.
That could actually explode in a completely different way, right? And then it's going to impact on us. This is even closer home than anything else.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
As serious leaders and intellectuals, we shouldn't, frankly, accept that coffers were empty story. Because, you know, Patrick, and these Waheshimiwas know, you are running a budget deficit.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you look at last year's budget, it had a deficit in the neighborhood of 720 billion. A deficit. So by definition, so this silly idea being promoted, like government has, in the central bank, I guess, some huge vaults where you keep money. It doesn't work that way. The government budget last year was a deficit of 720 billion. So by definition,
it was going to
on day one, you were actually supposed to find empty. Okay? What you should be talking about, since you have sat in that chair, how much have you collected in taxes? 1.7 trillion. What have you done with it? Since you sat on that chair, how much have you borrowed? A little over 500 billion in new borrowing. So what have you done with 2.2 trillion? So frankly, I mean, as serious business leaders in this country, as intellectuals, we should never ever accept that really silly being treated like you are nursery school children.
That's
that
Azimio.
their coffers were empty. Bure kabisa.
This is Azimio data. As Bunyasi Sakwa is putting here.
Well, this is data from central bank. This is data from treasury. This is the same data.
Okay, this is the same.
Sure.
Let's. If you looked at a Business Daily as a debt repayment surpassed state running expenses, it says public debt repayment nearly triples in 6 years. For the first 9 months of the current financial year, debt repayment overtook the national government's recurrent spending on items like civil servant salaries for the first time, underlying the burden of mounting state borrowing. Kenya spent 815.35 billion shillings on debt repayment between July 2022 and March, up from 740.69 billion shillings in the same period a year earlier. We had the deputy president who's just jetting to the country. I think he comes back today from Botswana. You're looking for the diaspora bond. We shall listen to him and what he had to say regarding that. But Bill Okero, if right now, in 6 months, this is the current state of play, and we have 2 years that we have to wait, it seems... another year.
Or another year.
It's 2 years from the beginning.
2 years from the beginning. You're resetting the clock.
Resetting
the clock. And the calendar.
Well out. 2 years.
Well out.
You see, from August, 2 years. Not from now.
From now?
No.
Yeah. It's well known, really, that the economy was in chaos. Everybody knew. That's why the last election, the campaign was premised on the issue of the economy. And the former president was generous in his own way. He said it's true the economy is in a bad situation. He didn't say anything, else to the contrary. And so this government knew that this was going to be the priority, the economy, more than anything else. That's where the crisis was. Fine, you can identify economy as a priority, but are your actions and your strategies and your policies based on priorities themselves? Because if they're not, then you will only make the situation worse. For me, that is my worry now. That you know that some of the most important reason why we are in this crisis is because of the debt, the huge debt, the recklessness of the previous administration, borrowing left, right, and center, and put us into this hole. So I would have thought that the first thing this government would do is, first and foremost, to go slow on this borrowing. But when you see the figures published last week, 578 billion or something to that effect borrowed in the 7 months, means we're still on the same path. But the second thing is the one that's more important, that yes, you have a crisis, yes, okay, organize your expenditure, address spending, public spending. Again, that has not been addressed. In fact, it's the opposite. This government has gone on holiday, as if we're the richest country in town, and they didn't lead by example. The figures published by the Controller of Budget shows State House is the first culprit, doubling. They spend what they were supposed to spend in 12 months in 4 months. The Deputy's office is the next one, and all the other institutions are also following suit. So I think unless, and this is why today in the editorial of your paper, the Auditor General is saying that unless something is done on the spending, this country is not going to go anywhere.
Plug the loopholes. Actually,
yeah, and this is about priorities. So, in my view, they do appreciate the economy is the problem, but the way they are going about it, I don't think they are going to address that problem. And 2 years is not going to be. I think even as a will be in this table talking about this thing, because if you are still digging the hole, and you are not taking the right steps towards addressing the problem, we'll get deeper and deeper into that hole. I don't think we'll be in any better situation. And the world economy, as he says, the world does not wait for you. Things are not going to get worse. The world is going to get more worse because there is recession all over Europe. So I think really, if I were in this government, luckily I'm not, I would be sitting, as the deputy said, they would be burning the midnight oil, although we're not seeing the effects of that. But I think they really need to do something seriously. And the one thing they need to do, we've said it in this table, time and engage the people who are in business, engage the economists, engage the country, the industry, the farmers, engage people, listen. The government is not listening. It's not engaging anyone. The government seems to believe they know everything. And this is, I'm telling you, that is going to be the Waterloo. This feeling that you know everything and you can do everything without engaging industry, without engaging farmers, without engaging, you know, the people who are the key players in the economy, or without even listening to what others are saying and simply doing what you want to do. I don't think that is the right thing. And that was the problem with Uhuru. He wasn't listening. This guy is doing worse.
He's picked up the tab, he's following it, he's not listening.
Yeah, I think that this is a very valid point.
Of not listening.
You need to be very categorical. That you need a lot more listening. Okay. That's very important. Two, we probably need a bit more coherence also, so that, you know, behind the scenes, people sit together, compare their numbers, and decide who will speak about it. And so on, so that you have to manage the
messaging.
process. Yeah. There are many things that governments do all over the world that they don't want their citizens to know. You don't say everything, but whatever you hold back must not be something burning, because then the fire will reveal it. So they need to talk to each other and sort of be consistent, give us a way forward. For example, if they did on the expenditure side, they would rationalize the expenditure. It may end up perhaps being the same quantum of expenditure, but do you need it this month, or do you need it in December or next year, or not at all in some cases? You worry about issues of unit costs that we have talked about, you know, shave off those, like the criticism around the SGR, for example, the cost of SGR relative to what Ethiopia was doing. We were told that we had pampered it too much. We spent too much on land compensation. And I was on the Public Accounts Committee, and I had the fortune of listening one time in a question and answer session with the people from the National Land Commission, who had brought in, we demanded to get the list of who was being compensated. And we looked at it, and we know Kenya is, how can I put it politely? We know the way Kenya is settled. If you move from the coast, you can expect certain dominant names, because names tell us, roughly speaking, not 100%. As you move, it is quite a kaleidoscope of different names that you would expect. But we found a high degree of similarity. Then that indicated one thing, that people had moved into the pathway for purposes of compensation. And the compensation rates in the middle of Dry Ukambani were higher than the rates, and I might be exaggerating this one, and the rates that you might have compensated as you move down Naivasha through this, you know, heavily settled high real estate price area. These were governance issues that were not fully addressed. We must eliminate those, and I agree with this criticism that going forward, we have to listen, we have to work with realistic costs, we have to space out our planning, we have to be rigorous in what enters the pipeline, and so on. And those are all issues that we did raise last time, that I put in my bill as justifying why we needed a public debt management authority to manage this. And I know that debt issues are now coming back. And by the way, Governor Ndiritu, you'll be interested to know that I think in accordance with our laws, we're not supposed to, you know, borrow to come and pay recurrent costs, including salaries. But we consistently did it. And this was raised very softly, almost like something under the breath. We were breaking the law. And now it's coming out. If you did continue to borrow along the same lines, you can't pay salaries, because we were borrowing. If you do the numbers, and funds are fungible, if you do the numbers, we met our costs partly because of borrowing, which is not something we should have been doing. It's mismanagement that occurred. That must be corrected. That I would say that as a Kenya Kwanza person, because it's our intention to make a sea change in the way things are managed.
Right. I want to sort of take us away from the now and go back a bit. I'm very strong. I mean, my area was accidents and why accidents are caused. And we have this thing about accident causation theory. And I believe we got an accident where we are now. It's not as though it was, we got an accident. We got somewhere and we are trying to salvage an accident that has happened. If you look at a lot of the reasons why organizations have accidents or they have things that are happening that way, most of the times it is an executive decision that set up that corporation. And when you look at, say, a typical corporation that is set up and the owner is looking at saying, I want to maximize profits, right? And at the top level, that is what you're looking at all the time. By the time that thing reaches the workflow, it is money at all costs. That's how it is translated in all the procedures and processes that go all the way down. And when it becomes money at all costs because you're fully profit driven, it means that somebody will take shortcuts to do that. So the reality at the bottom, and you're sitting at the top saying, why is this happening? Why are we having accidents and everything else? Patrick Obath, who set up that company, is the one who is causing that to happen. So if we take ourselves back to what is driving this country, the big decision we made as a country, where was that big decision made? I think it was in our constitution of 2010. And that is driving a lot of things that we are seeing today happening, one way or another. And some of the red flags, at least as the private sector we saw at that time, one was increasing the size of parliament, which was done. The second was the number of counties that we had. Are the counties individually able to be business units that can survive on their own without needing money to come in? And then the third thing was the way the government was designed itself. Now, if you look at all those things and you look at the cost of government today, which is what you're talking about, how do we sort of minimize that cost and everything else? A lot of the way we are structured now was almost designed at the time the Naivasha conference happened. And a lot of things changed. A few things changed at that point, which are actually costing us money now as a country. So I think that we have what we have. The accident has happened, and we need to sort out a lot of the things that can be stopped at what we call the operational level. And that is how we run the country on a day-to-day basis. I loved it the other day when we saw, every time you see the cabinet office, everybody's got a laptop everywhere. But that is just that at the top. How does that come down all the way? We've been talking about e-government for a long time in terms of trying to reduce the cost of running government. But that will not only reduce, it will not only make it more efficient, it's going to mean that a lot of people have to be redeployed into other areas. So the investment now may take about 2 or 3 years, and then you begin to get the benefits of it. So I think there's some hard decisions that have to be made. And I'm hoping this government will make those hard decisions around the cost of government.
Okay, I want to yes, okay. But
yeah, the indications at the start are that it may not happen, but I think the discussion we need to have and push is that we need to reduce the cost of government by reorganizing the way we run this country.
That's true. The accident happening also can be advised by good listening. Yeah, if you listen, what Bill Okero is saying, because I wanted to ask the question about listening, and there was a special umbrage that was raised by oil importers, regarding the edible oil, because I think also we had businessmen really raising special umbrage with this, but the government went full steam ahead, and they're still importing. I don't know what's the current state of play about the edible oils being imported into the country.
You said this government, like any other government we have had, for corruption is the main issue. Even the cost of government is not about the institutions. No. It's the way things are done. It's the operational aspect. So when you set up an entity like NTC, go to Afro-Exim Bank and collect 24 billion loan, and you say, I want you to buy things from outside. These things can be bought by him, it can be bought by him. You want to reduce the cost? Yes, okay, just give a waiver of tax for 6 months to keep the cost down, the way you did in Corona time. That's all you needed to do. Instead, you're saying, okay, Ndiritu go and import cooking oil, 124,000 metric tons, don't pay duty. I am already importing crude. I've invested 100 billion shillings in manufacturing, in equipment, I'm manufacturing it. All you needed to do is tell me, okay, how much are you paying in taxes? I'm paying VAT and other government taxes total almost 21%. Okay, remove 10% or 20%. You'll still be cheaper than what this guy is going to do. Here you're going to lose that revenue. You'll shut down these companies and also lose another 50 billion revenue you're collecting.
Yes.
Why? Because Ndiritu is politically correct. He supported it during the campaigns. He finds the election. So you want a payback. So that's why you are doing this. It's not about cost of everything happening in KNTC. All this import of things is not being done openly. There's no tender. Have you seen a tender of sugar, of the rice, or of the edible oils? No, it's all being given. Patrick, yes, take this letter. You go and bring 300,000 metric tons of sugar. And Ndiritu go and bring 100,000 tons of oil. This is being done in order to pay back people who finance this government. And it's the worst corruption that you can ever talk about. What is happening now in KNTC? And the government knows. As an industry.
So NTC, was it a fig leaf to cover
KNTC,
for all this?
Because
it has been there, but we've seen the emergence of the KNTC.
It's a conduit that has been sent up. And the whole thing is about price stabilization. You know, this is the story. But ask the business community. All those things, has the government called anybody in government to sit down? Have they called, for example, the cooking oil industry? Told them, gentlemen, yes.
To listen.
It's a bit expensive. Is there any way we can reduce? Yes, we can reduce. Eliminate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levies on that food. Will reduce by 10%. Or can you call the manufacturers of wheat flour or the sugar industry or any of nobody. It's just, that's why I say that the government doesn't listen. They just decided that they know the answers, and the answers is that CSs themselves, their companies, are the ones importing through KNTC.
CSs?
Yes, and we have all of them. The government knows. It's the CS, this government is doing the same thing the other government was doing. We were told there were dollar billionaires in the previous CSs. These ones are not going to be dollar billionaires. They're going to be trillionaires if we're not careful. So I think what the government needs to do is, frankly, we are in a situation where we cannot afford. If things can be done by the private sector, let them do it. If things are bad, call them and engage them. Can we address this problem this way or that way? But I think to try and get the government to do everything, no, I think we are going to get the situation worse. It's going to be exactly what he said. This country is going to be in a more serious economics. You see the way now they were not able to service our loans, the euro bonds, the rates, the bonds. People are asking for now 14, 15, 16%. You know, you cannot survive. They will not be able to pay. I'm telling you. And nobody has thought about, when the PS was asked last week, why didn't, in Parliament, in Senate, why didn't you ask for rescheduling of some of these loans, bilateral and multilateral? They said, okay, we are thinking of doing that. 7 months. The first thing you should have done when you said this is, let's look at our loan portfolios and let's talk to people. Let's see how we can reschedule some of these things and get some breathing space. There's a run on treasury. People are looking for how to make money. Today you walk the streets of Nairobi. People have opened offices. Do you have a pending bill? I can sort it out. Do you have something being imported? KRA? I can sort it out. I mean, you can do that. Part of the reasons why they couldn't pay salaries is not because of the debt. And Dungu should tell us what is the problem he's going through. There's a run on treasury.
He should speak out.
Yeah, he should speak out.
So what he
unless he says, no, I'm not going to spend money the way you guys want. And David Ndiritu came out on national TV. He said, the way we are spending money, this government doesn't care. This is the chairman of the council.
Is it chief advisor?
Yes, he said it on national TV. So I mean, so what do you expect then? Things will go south.
Coordination.
Can we interrogate maybe the rhyme and reason of KNTC? It's been a moribund corporation, but we've seen the resurgence of it. And what they're doing, how are they mandated to do it? Is it a conducive environment to do it right now?
Well, I mean, you look, all decision making right now at the top, at the leadership, at the senior leadership of government is primarily driven by what is being explained here. How much money are individuals going to make? Okay? Because look, KNTC, we have, government has had KNTC
right
from independence. But it's a moribund institution, and the economy has moved way beyond price controls and things like that. You have 14, 20 players in edible oils who already have created deficiencies in the value chain and in the supply chain. Why do you need to go and revive a moribund institution to be now what you're going to use while you have all these market players? You simply tell the market players, this is the price drop I'm looking for. It is X shillings, and you go and do it. take like another crazy scheme to import tractors from Belarus. Okay, now look, maybe the Belarus tractors, whatever, they are cheap, but the real question is this: where is the supply chain? Where do you get spare parts from, and things like that? Now you are buying these tractors to put in agricultural mechanization, and that's okay. But like Patrick is saying, fixing agriculture is a 5-year proposition. You are not going to do it this season. So you can't say you are importing tractors from Belarus in order to bring the cost of food down. I mean, that is simply not true. You are doing it to avail yourself some large commission and so on. And that is that is the sequence of decision making in each and every sector. But to come then to the question Patrick raised, did we make a mistake with the 2010 constitution that we need to correct in order to save ourselves from these kind of difficulties? Now, in a very real way, the proposals from last session of BBI, that is a kind of question they were trying to address. Now, if you move forward to now, the idea of these so-called bipartisan talks and saying, can you create an expanded process of listening to one another as a country called Kenya? That is what the opposition is pushing for. That is what people like CMD are pushing for. Yeah? Can we have an expanded conversation?
Executive, not conversation.
An expanded?
Executive.
An expanded conversation.
Going back to KNTC, yeah. I have a slightly modified view of KNTC. And I just take it from the oil industry, how it worked. I mean, we were oil, whatever number of, there were 7 big guys who were operating and everything else. And the government, in its wisdom at that time, said, we have to bring these oil companies to book because they are raping the country and taking profits out. And so they created this thing called OTS, right? To sort of control. And then EPRA was brought in to control prices and whatever. And they had this magnificent formula.
Yeah.
Right? That
copied by Tanzania and other countries.
Whatever it is, every single person in the supply chain has got a fixed margin that has been scientifically done and whatever. So that nobody suffers in the supply chain of fuel. Everybody gets their cut in that thing. So the only thing that you control at any given time is the inputs. And you know what the output will be automatically when that happens. And the other thing you can do, depending on how you want the economy is going, you can begin to play around with the margins that people are getting in there to drive a certain, to balance out within that. So it's a great working thing. At that time, it was supposed to bring prices down. That was, let's just go back to why that was done. But we told them at that time, I was in the industry working, that this is not going to bring the price down. All it will do, it will make you understand how the prices come out. That is all it did. Nothing else. It didn't actually bring the prices down. And even right now,
it's global.
Everybody is bashing the government about the prices of fuel. There is nothing they can do about it because the inputs are what determine what the prices are in this place. What used to happen as well, when industry had the freedom, was you could cross-subsidize within a company. So Mandera, the fuel price in Mandera was the same as in Nairobi, although you actually had to transport it all the way there. It's because you look at the volume in Nairobi and you use a part of the margin you're making in Nairobi to subsidize the fuel going to Mandera because it's a small volume and it's a cost going up there. So everybody benefited where you could actually begin as an organization to play around with your prices. KNTC, what opportunity does it present? And I think that is really what you should look at. It's not around what is happening now, but the fact that you could actually bring in raw material for these guys who manufacture and say, can we bring in a 90,000 ton of crude palm oil or crude whatever it is, and these guys then get it at a cost-effective price and now let them manufacture and do it in the country.
Instead of bringing the end product.
Instead of bringing the end product in. Okay. Right? So I think KNTC is useful so long as you think about it in a different way and use that to support what we already have established here and allow the industries in this country to grow.
Should KMTC also start with also involving the stakeholders?
I think
if we have
it is a way of doing it, because when the issue of the OTS came in, we all sat around the table and it was all agreed, it was worked out in detail and everything, and then we are all part of it. You have to be registered as an oil marketer to participate in this. You don't just come in and become a trader as a briefcase guy coming in. So I think there is an opportunity within that organization if we think about it the right way.
So we just need to streamline it.
Yeah.
We just need to be streamlined.
No,
can we take a short break?
check.
Bilo, allow me just to take a short break, then we circle back with you as well. Well, yeah, we're watching Sokoni here. We take a short break, 8 o'clock on the nose. See you on the other side of the break.